Pre-order my upcoming novel, American Evil, in the description below. I can't believe I finished Final Fantasy VI several days ago. I believe on Monday. I finished another long RPG since then, Xenoblade Chronicles 2. And the entire time I was doing that, I was just sitting here thinking that, like, oh man, Final Fantasy VI is so much better. You won't ever catch me wearing a shirt featuring Xenoblade Chronicles 2, right? So when you really take a step back, when you really look at the elephant in the room, when you look at how JRPGs have developed, when you look at the history, when you look at all of these great games, stuff like Dragon Quest and all the alternatives out there, right? When you look at the past and future of Final Fantasy, one thing is very clear, I think, is that Final Fantasy VI is absolutely a masterpiece of the genre. Like, there's nothing that really manages to blend so many great elements like seamlessly, right? Great sprite work, great mechanics, great unique ideas, memorable characters, iconic moments, right? Like, I was really surprised at how emotional I got, like seeing that ending, right? Seeing Terra standing on the airship and then like undoing her hair and just letting it like fly with the wind. Like, it's so good. It was remarkable from start to finish. And I don't think there was anything in the game that was poorly handled or not all that well executed. With the possible exception of like the Thamasa plot line, I don't know why why they did it this way, but like Rome and Strago are very, very un uninvolved characters in World of Balance. You just kind of meet them and then the world ends and like whatever. Like, they have interesting lore, right? They have interesting relationships with other characters, right? Like, there's things to like about them at the same time. But when you actually look at like the long and short of it, like I think that particular quest line and like the things that happen in it are kind of contrived and don't really make a whole lot of sense. Like Shadow comforting Terra, like Shadow refusing to save Realm initially from like the burning house, like Strago not talking to Shadow at all, like in regards to that, like the whole Thamasa thing. Like, why didn't the Empire go to Thamasa first? Right? If they were so interested in magic, right? Like it's just one of those things where you're just like, oh, but it's a secret though. But there are random soldiers on the boat who will tell you that some people on a on in Thamasa are said to have magic powers. So it's like it's not some out of the way place that nobody knows about, right? Like the Empire should have at least set someone to investigate, and they're not very good at hiding the fact that they have magic powers, right? You have kids like practicing it openly and stuff like that. So like for me, it's yeah, definitely a weak part of the game. I think the whole Espers escaping the Esper world and like running amok, like that plot line was kind of pointless to the point where like I don't even know why it was included, just to pad out World of Balance, I suppose. But again, that's just like a minor nitpick, right? I can talk about how some characters don't feel like they do a whole lot, but at the long and short of it is like Final Fantasy VI is at its core a masterpiece, and I do think it is a masterpiece that will never be topped because I found myself thinking when I was playing this just how well the game manages to incorporate a very well thought out, interesting narrative and world while still allowing you, the player, the freedom to kind of imagine the future of the world, right? The future of like the characters and the future of the details like that the game doesn't fill in for you, right? So like I found myself really thinking like a lot, like, wow, why is Maria not in the game? Is she dead by World of Ruin? Like we don't get any confirmation of that, but why does she look like Celis? Like, do they have some kind of relationship? Like, were they separated at birth or something? What about Terra? Like, what her entire like thing of like the theme of finding love, right? Like it's interesting how the game depicts it as her discovering motherly love and deciding that she wants to protect the kids of the world, which was pretty based, honestly. But at the same time, it's like, the character is notably single by the end. So it's like, which one of the male characters would she settle down with? Again, Like there are all these very real mysteries with Final Fantasy VI that don't have a very thorough explanation. So like a lot of it is open to interpretation. You know, why does Shadow decide to kill himself at the end of after you beat Kefka? Like it's just such an out of nowhere thing. But you know, it just kind of happens anyway. You know, like you have all these other characters and what they've been doing. Like you know, Locke, interestingly, like he doesn't seem to be interested in finding Celis at all. Like his thing is like going out and finding the Phoenix Magicite and like trying to bring Rachel back to life. And like, yeah, that's what he's been trying to do all along. But at the same time, it's like, well, what brought him to this point, right? And again, like he does come back to Celis, and like you know they have that reunion with Rachel, and it's uh it's great, but at the same time, there's a lot of gaps there, right? The game gives you the game respects your intelligence and creativity enough to allow you to imagine these scenarios for yourself, right? The developers really respected the player enough to understand that the player doesn't need to be told how everything works, right? You don't have like hours and hours of cutscenes of characters like expositing about the Empire and how they conquered the surrounding territory of their continent and how they're like doing all this stuff. No, you get like a really good introductory cutscene, you know, in a neutral territory, Narsh. You have Terra flip from the Empire to like the Returners, and the story progresses from there. Like you don't need like an in-depth analysis over like, ooh, what's the Empire's tax policy? Oh, how did Gestahl come to power? Oh, like you don't need that. Like because that's not really necessary for like the overall narrative, right? There's a lot about these characters that we don't necessarily know about, right? Celis, for instance. Why exactly did she decide to turn against the Empire before Locke meets her? Right? What exactly was the circumstances behind that? Right? Like immediately, like it apparently had something to do with Kefka and how she didn't agree with him, but she wasn't with Kefka. She was with like he was with Leo at the time, right? So to me, it just seems like she conquered South Figaro and then had like a change of heart, right? And again, like that happened before she met Locke. So again, the circumstances, just again, the exact details of that scenario of what happened there is it's open to interpretation, and I really respect that about the game, right? You know, I love Final Fantasy VII. Like I love where the series went after this for sure for like the next several entries, but I do think in a way, like Final Fantasy VI has this feeling of like the story isn't over, right? You know, you beat the bad guy and you save the world, but like these characters still have a lot of life left to live. And in a way, the fact that the developers have never tried to like remake the game or expand on it with a sequel, really just goes to show you just um, how much of a perfectly told story this is, right? Because it knew exactly where to end. It knew exactly how much to give you, how much it needed to be successful, and from there it was all up to the player to discover and play through this masterpiece.